At 1:16 a.m. on June 6, 1944, Staff Sergeant Thomas Whitaker sat hunched over his radio console inside C-47 number 42 to 92,847, 30 miles off the coast of Normandy. The plane rocked in turbulence as German flak batteries opened fire below, their bursts flashing like hellish flowers across the night sky. Through his headset, the pilot's voice crackled with tension. 3 minutes to drop zone. Behind Whitaker, the cargo bay was packed wall-to-wall with 127 paratroopers, silent and waiting, each one tethered to the static line, weapons clipped to their legs, faces streaked black with grease paint. Their boots thudded faintly against the metal floor with every shudder of the aircraft. They couldn't see the instruments. They couldn't hear the radio. They were depending entirely on one man in the dark to get them to the right place. Whitaker's job was simple on paper. Monitor the Pathfinder beacon, confirm its signal, and alert the pilot when they'd reached drop zone A. He'd done it 17 times in training, flawlessly, every time. But tonight wasn't like training. Tonight, nothing made sense. The cockpit was cold, bone-deep cold. Whitaker's breath fogged with every exhale. His fingers, stiff in fleece-lined gloves, moved slowly across the radio panel. 3 indicator lights blinked in the dark, green, yellow, red, each one carrying a specific meaning. He'd memorized the sequence back in England. Green meant the Pathfinder beacon was active. Yellow meant they were approaching. Red meant, drop now. But tonight, the green light blinked twice, paused, blinked 3 more times, then went dark. No steady rhythm. No pattern. Just chaos. The beacon, broadcasting on 38.7 megahertz, was supposed to pulse once every second. Simple Morse logic for a battlefield. But this was broken. Or jammed. Or worse, decoyed. Whitaker double-checked the dial. Still locked on 38.7. He rechecked the antenna connection. Firm. He tapped the console. The green light flickered back to life. 4 blinks this time. Then went out again. Wrong. All wrong. Wind shrieked through the fuselage. The cargo door was already open, roaring with freezing air. The men were crouched and ready, fingers tense on gear straps. If the order came, they would leap blindly into the dark, into flak, into whatever waited on the ground. Whitaker swallowed hard. The pilot came over the headset again, more urgent this time. Radio, confirm Pathfinder signal. Do we have green? Over. Whitaker stared at the panel. His throat felt tight, tongue dry, mouth metallic. The manual was clear. If the beacon is malfunctioning, report. Abort the drop. Circle back. Await further instruction. But there would be no further instructions. Not out here. Not tonight. Circling back meant disaster. Another wave of planes, nearly 200, was right behind them. No lights. No transponders. No margin for error. Turn now, and you collided in the dark. The Germans were already lighting up the sky. Whitaker could see the tracers now, thin red lines rising like burning spears from the earth below. He had seconds to decide. The Germans knew. You could feel it in the flak, closer now, heavier. Every second on this course dragged them deeper into the crosshairs. The shells weren't probing anymore, they were bracketing. The sky lit with bursts that thumped through the fuselage like fists. Whitaker stared at his console, willing the lights to return. The yellow light blinked once, then the red, and then darkness. Gone. Beacon dead. That meant one thing. They were flying blind. Radio, I need confirmation. Are we on course? Over. The pilot's voice was harder now. Sharper. Urgent. He was flying toward a coastline he couldn't see, depending on a man in the belly of the plane to tell him whether to drop 127 paratroopers into chaos or call it off. Whitaker's gloved hand hovered over the transmit button. His chest tightened. His entire body screamed with tension. He had 2 choices. Tell the truth. Beacon's offline. Abort the drop. That meant circling back into the path of 200 inbound aircraft, threading through blacked-out airspace while flak crews zeroed them in. It meant killing the schedule, risking collisions, risking the entire invasion. Or lie. Say the signal was good. Trust the blink pattern he couldn't decipher. Trust his gut. He pressed the mic. Pilot, Pathfinder signal is. Then he saw it. A small dial, tucked beneath the main frequency tuner, hidden in shadow, half obscured by a metal bracket. Whitaker blinked. He hadn't noticed it in training. Never touched it. In tiny stenciled letters, barely legible in the cockpit's red glow, it read, Alt 42, 1 MHz. The backup frequency selector. The primary dial was still set to 38. 7, the frequency for drop zone A. But this wasn't in the manual. No one had ever mentioned a backup. Whitaker hesitated for half a breath, then twisted the dial. Instantly, the green light ignited. Bright, steady, 1 pulse per second. Perfect cadence. A second later, the yellow came on. 2 miles to drop. They were there. Whitaker snatched the mic. Pilot, confirm Pathfinder signal. Green and steady. We are on course. The reply came sharp, confident. Copy that. 2 minutes to drop. Whitaker exhaled. The tremor in his fingers vanished. He'd done it. Found the backup frequency. Saved the drop. The red light blinked on. The jump was coming. But what Whitaker didn't know, what no one on board knew, was this. The beacon he'd just locked onto was not drop zone A. It wasn't even close. He was reading the Pathfinder signal for drop zone C, 6 miles south, across the flooded Duve River, deep in German-held territory. Right into the fortified perimeter of the 91st Luftland Infantry Division, battle-hardened, dug in, awake, and waiting. And he had just told the pilot to fly straight toward it. The radio operators aboard the C-47s had their mission reduced to a simple card. Each one had it taped to the console. A list of beacon frequencies for every drop zone. A, B, C, D. Just tune in, read the lights, drop the paratroopers. In training, it worked flawlessly. In England, during the rehearsals in April and May, the system looked bulletproof. Every Pathfinder beacon went active on time. Every transport pilot followed the signal precisely. Paratroopers landed within 200 yards of the target. Tight clusters, full units hitting the ground together, armed and ready. Commanders called it the most accurate airborne operation in history. But Normandy wasn't England. The first problem hit before they even took off. A storm rolled in on June 5th, winds slamming the channel at 35 miles per hour, cloud ceilings dropping below 500 feet. Eisenhower nearly scrubbed the entire operation. But the forecast called for a break, a 6-hour window of clear enough skies just after midnight. It wasn't ideal, but it was enough. The order was given. The invasion was on. The second problem was German flak. Allied intelligence had identified 42 anti-aircraft batteries defending the Normandy coast. The real number was 87. When the first wave of C-47s crossed the coastline just after 1 a.m., the sky exploded. Tracer fire stitched the dark horizon. Flak shells burst at bomber altitude, 800 feet, sending shrapnel and shockwaves through formation after formation. Pilots immediately broke ranks. Some dove, some climbed. Most banked hard left or right, desperate to escape the kill zones. In training, they'd flown in perfect V formations, 10 planes wide, stacked in altitude, wings no more than 50 feet apart. Over Normandy, that discipline vanished in less than 10 minutes. What had been a precise airborne spearhead scattered into a storm of aircraft across 50 square miles of French night. Then came the third problem, the Pathfinders. 18 Pathfinder teams had jumped at 12:30 a.m., half an hour ahead of the main force. Their mission was critical. Land first, set up the radio beacons, activate the Eureka signal so the C-47s could lock on and guide the paratroopers in. Only 6 teams reached their intended drop zones. The rest were blown miles off course by the storm winds. Some landed in flooded fields and drowned before they could unclip from their chutes. Others dropped straight into German machine gun nests. Beacons were smashed. Operators were killed or captured before they even opened their radio kits. And some landed so far from their targets their signals couldn't even reach the incoming transports. By the time the first wave of C-47s arrived over Normandy, chaos was complete. Radio operators scanned for Pathfinder beacons, desperate, anxious, checking their cards and retuning dials. Some heard nothing. Some caught faint, flickering signals that came and went. Some picked up multiple beacons on the same frequency, overlapping, confused, impossible to identify. They had seconds to decide. No visual cues. No lights. No way to verify the ground below. Pilots had 3 options. Follow a weak signal and hope it was right. Drop the paratroopers blind and pray they landed somewhere useful. Abort the run, circle back, and risk fuel loss, collisions, and missing the entire window. Most chose to drop. The results were brutal. Paratroopers landed in rivers, trees, hedgerows, German machine gun nests. Units shattered on contact. One stick hit a swamp. Half the men drowned before they fired a shot. Another landed in the middle of a German artillery battery. Some paratroopers landed 20 miles from their intended target. The 101st Airborne Division lost half its strength in the first hour. Not from gunfire, from dispersion, from chaos. Thousands of men were alone in the dark, soaked, disoriented, hunted, wandering the Norman countryside with no idea where their units were, where the objective was, or even where the front line began. Some spent hours crawling through the hedgerows. Some spent days. The planners had believed in the radio. They'd tested it, drilled it, practiced it under perfect conditions. But they'd never tested it in a storm, under fire, with half the beacons missing, with pilots flying evasive, with radio operators guessing at phantom signals while flak lit the sky like a thunderstorm. What happened on June 6th wasn't failure. It was improvisation. It was men making decisions in the dark, some right, some wrong, while the greatest military gamble in history unfolded around them. Thomas Whitaker had been trained to follow the checklist. Trust the beacon. Trust the frequency card. Trust the plan. But the plan was already falling apart. The yellow light on his console blinked steady, strong, clear, unwavering. The cleanest signal he'd seen all night. Relief surged through him. He'd found the backup frequency. They were on course. In 90 seconds, 127 paratroopers would jump from the open cargo door behind him into what he believed was Drop Zone A. They'd hit the ground, rally on the Pathfinder team, and move east toward their objective, a stone bridge over the Murderette River. Take the bridge, and German reinforcements couldn't reach Utah Beach. Lose it, and the entire landing force could be cut off before dawn. The pilot's voice crackled again through Whitaker's headset. Radio, confirm, we're tracking Drop Zone A beacon. Over. Whitaker's eyes flicked to the frequency card taped beside his console. Drop Zone A, 38. 7 megahertz. But 38. 7 had been dead, silent, dark, unreadable. The signal he was tracking now, the one burning steady on his console, was 42. 1. He assumed it was a backup, a failsafe the Pathfinders had switched to after the primary failed. It made sense. The Army always had redundancies. There was always a plan B. No one had told him otherwise. He pressed the transmit button. Pilot, affirmative. Tracking Drop Zone A. Signal is green and steady. But Whitaker didn't know the truth. His frequency card was wrong. Not completely. Just incomplete. It listed only the primary frequencies. The alternate frequencies, the backup beacons for each drop zone, were in a different document. That document had been issued to pilots and navigators 2 days before D-Day. Radio operators weren't given copies. Their orders were simple: monitor the primary. If the beacon failed, report it. Wait for instructions. Someone else would make the decision to switch. But Whitaker didn't know that. So when he twisted the dial to 42. 1, he thought he was doing everything by the book. He thought he was saving the mission. He thought he was bringing them home. He was wrong. The red light blinked on. 30 seconds to drop. Behind him, the jumpmaster stood at the open door, hand raised. The wind screamed through the fuselage, deafening, whipping the static lines. The paratroopers were on their feet, eyes forward, rucksacks strapped to their legs, M1 carbines slung across their chests. Their faces were streaked with black grease. None of them could hear the radio. None of them could see the lights. All they knew was what the pilot told them. The pilot was banking left. Whitaker felt the tilt in his gut, the shift in gravity. The green light on his console began to pulse faster. They were on final approach. Locked in. No turning back. And somewhere, 6 miles south of the real drop zone, a German division waited in the dark. They were close. Very close. Whitaker checked his watch. 1:19 a.m. Right on schedule. Then the flak hit. The blast came from the south, so close that he felt the shock wave ripple through the fuselage. The C-47 jolted. Rivets groaned. Loose metal rattled. The red light on his console flickered wildly. For a breathless second, Whitaker thought they'd been hit. But the engines held steady, the wings stayed level. The pilot's voice came through, calm, composed. We're through it. 30 seconds. Whitaker let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. His hands were trembling again. He gripped the edge of the console hard enough to whiten his knuckles. The green light pulsed. The yellow light stayed solid. The red light blazed bright. Everything was working. Everything was perfect. Except for one thing. They were 6 miles south of where they thought they were. The signal Whitaker had locked onto, the one glowing so strong, so steady, wasn't from Drop Zone A. It was from Drop Zone C. And Drop Zone C was not ready. It was meant to receive a different regiment entirely, the 501st Parachute Infantry. Their Pathfinder team had jumped on time, but the wind had scattered them. 3 men landed in a flooded field and drowned. 2 more were captured before they could even unpack their equipment. Only 1 man survived long enough to set up the radio beacon, alone, off target by half a mile, in a wooded area crawling with German patrols. That was the beacon Whitaker was tracking, the only signal strong enough to follow. The jumpmaster raised his arm. 5 seconds. The pilot throttled back. The roar of the engines dipped. The plane slowed to 110 miles per hour, jump speed. The paratroopers shifted forward. 1 step, then another. Rifles clutched tight. Static lines taut. The open door ahead of them was just black sky and wind. Whitaker pressed the transmit button one last time. Pilot, green light confirmed. We are over the drop zone. No hesitation. No doubt. He believed it. The jumpmaster slapped the first paratrooper on the shoulder, and just like that, 127 men jumped into the wrong drop zone. No one on board knew. The first man out the door was Private First Class Daniel Kowalski. He leapt into the night, counted to 4, felt the static line yank. The chute deployed with a crack. Suddenly, he was floating through blackness. The wind roared in his ears. Tracer fire stitched the sky to his left, distant and arcing away. He saw nothing below. No landmarks. No flares. No other parachutes. Just the dark silhouette of the C-47 banking hard away, vanishing into cloud. He hit ground at 1:21 a.m. hard. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. He tumbled, caught in his chute. He cut the cords, rolled flat, and lay still in the grass. Listening. Crickets. Wind. Distant machine gun fire, to the north. But no voices. No rally calls. No signal whistles. He was alone. Kowalski crawled to his knees. Unclipped his compass. He was supposed to land east of the Murderette River. From there, link up with his squad, push to the bridge. That was the mission. That was the plan. But the compass needle pointed south. He tapped it. Shook it. Checked again. Still south. That couldn't be right. The drop was supposed to take them northeast. He pulled out his map, clicked on his red lens flashlight, scanned the terrain, triangulated by the slope of the hills and the silhouette of a nearby steeple. His stomach turned. He wasn't anywhere near the Murderette River. He was 6 miles south, near a village called St. Marguerite, deep behind enemy lines. That's when he heard it. The low rumble of trucks. Engines. Multiple. Getting louder. Not American. Kowalski ducked into a ditch and leveled his rifle. Somewhere in the darkness, headlights blinked through the hedgerow. The Germans were coming. Kowalski dropped flat behind a hedgerow, heart pounding in his chest. The low growl of diesel engines rolled over the fields, getting louder. Closer. Then they appeared, black silhouettes against the tree line, 30 yards away. German Opel Blitz trucks. Canvas-covered beds. No lights. Moving fast. Troop transports, maybe ammo carriers. Maybe both. Headed north, toward Utah Beach. Kowalski didn't move. He lay flat in the mud, cheek pressed to the earth, counting out the seconds. 1 truck. 2. 3. 4. Then silence. He waited 30 seconds more, then slowly crawled west, keeping low, moving through brush and shadow. He found 2 other paratroopers in a roadside ditch. Neither from his platoon. Neither familiar. One wore the screaming eagle patch of the 506th PR. The other had the faded insignia of the 502nd. Both looked just as lost as he was. Where the hell are we? The 502nd trooper whispered. Kowalski kept his voice low. South. Way south. At least 6 miles off course. Jesus Christ. Before they could speak again, the growl returned. This time from the south. Engines. Multiple. Fast. The 3 of them pressed deeper into the ditch as 5 more trucks thundered past, tires hissing on the wet road. More Opels. All German. All moving north. That's when Kowalski understood. They had landed on a main supply route, the arterial road from St. Miraglise to the coast. It was the primary German reinforcement corridor, the lifeline for sending men, ammo, and armor to the beaches. Every German unit south of Normandy would be coming this way. And right now, in the darkness, they were pouring north by the dozens. "We have to stop them," Kowalski muttered. The 506th trooper stared at him. "Stop them? There's 3 of us." "I know. And about 1,000 of them." "I know." But then, figures emerged from the trees. Paratroopers. Lost. Disoriented. Some limping. Some running. 4 from the 501st. 3 from the 502nd. 2 more from the 506th, scattered across units. Strangers. None of them supposed to be here. But here they were. On the road. With the trucks. Within 20 minutes, Kowalski had gathered 19 men. All from different regiments. All off course. All staring down the same enemy highway. One of them, a wiry sergeant from the 501st, had a bazooka. Another carried a satchel charge. A third had a Bangalore torpedo, the long steel pipe meant for blowing wire. These were tools meant for bridges, bunkers, not convoys. But the bridge was 6 miles north. And the Germans were here now. The sergeant looked at Kowalski. "Well, Lieutenant, what do you think?" Kowalski watched another truck roll past. Then another. He could hear more engines out in the darkness, rumbling, revving. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Every second they waited, more German troops moved toward the beaches. More weapons. More firepower. More death for the men at Utah. He didn't hesitate. "We hit them." No one argued. Because they all knew the truth. What was coming down that road could tip the invasion. They were 19 against a convoy. No air support. No artillery. Just a bazooka. A few explosives. And raw desperation. And what happened next wasn't in any manual. No general had written it. No officer had planned for it. No one had imagined that a handful of lost paratroopers could cripple an entire German supply line before dawn. But that's exactly what they were about to try. But that's exactly what they did. No heroics. No grand speeches. Just 19 lost paratroopers in the dark, setting up an ambush. Kowalski split them into 2 teams. 9 on the north side of the road, 10 on the south. They moved into the hedgerows, crawling through the brush in silence, breath white in the cold air. The bazooka team, 2 men from the 501st, took cover behind a low stone wall 30 yards off the road. Good angle. Clear line of fire. The rest crouched behind hedges, rifles and grenades ready. "Don't shoot until the rocket goes," Kowalski whispered. "Then hit everything that moves." He checked his watch. 1:47 a.m. The rumble of engines echoed across the fields again. Low, steady. For trucks. Maybe 5. Coming slow. No headlights. The Germans were trying to stay invisible. Then, movement. The first truck emerged from the bend in the road. An Opel Blitz. Canvas covered. Probably 20 troops in the back. It rumbled forward at 15 miles per hour, engine low and steady. Kowalski saw a faint orange glow in the cab. The driver was smoking. Then, FFFFFD boom. The bazooka fired. The rocket struck the engine block dead center. A flash of white-hot fire. The truck jerked sideways, front axle shattered, hood blown open like a peeled tin can. Flames surged up through the canvas. German soldiers tumbled out the back, shouting, coughing, falling into the ditch. Some were on fire. Some were crawling. All were disoriented. The second truck hit the brakes too late. It skidded, tires screeching, fishtailed into the wreck ahead. Metal crunched. Then the hedgerows exploded. Rifle fire. Grenades. Muzzle flashes. Tracers. The paratroopers opened up from both sides. 30 calibers, M1 Garand's, Thompson's barking. Bullets tore through the trucks. Shell casings rained onto the wet grass. The air filled with the stink of cordite and burning rubber. The Germans had no idea what hit them. No idea how many were out there. They scattered. Some sprinted north. Some dropped and fired blindly into the hedgerows. One soldier tried to man a mounted MG-34 in the third truck's bed. A paratrooper with a .45 put 2 rounds through his chest before he reached the handle. The third truck tried to back up. Its gears groaned, wheels spinning in the mud. But one of the paratroopers, a kid from Kansas with a satchel charge, broke cover, sprinted across the road. 10 seconds of courage. He yanked the fuse, shoved the charge beneath the chassis, dove flat. Boom. The blast blew the rear axle off its mount. The frame lifted 6 inches, then slammed back down. No fire. No explosion. Just a dead hulk in the road. Leaking fuel, tires blown, engine silent. 3 trucks disabled. Dozens of Germans pinned down or dead. The convoy was stalled. And the road, the vital reinforcement artery to the beaches, was choked. But it wasn't over yet. More engines were coming. And the Germans knew where the fire was coming from now. The 4th truck tried to run. The driver slammed it into reverse, gunned the engine, and roared south, back towards St. Miraglise. But the Bangalore team was waiting. 2 paratroopers had crawled across the ditch during the firefight, dragging the long metal tube through the mud. They'd jammed it into a culvert under the road. Waited. Watched. As the 4th truck rolled over the spot, they triggered the fuse. Boom. The road heaved. A geyser of dirt and shrapnel erupted beneath the truck. It flipped sideways, skidded off the road, and slammed into a tree. Screams from inside. German soldiers trapped, some crawling out through ripped canvas, coughing in the smoke. Some didn't crawl out at all. And then, silence. The entire ambush had lasted 4 minutes. Kowalski stood in the ditch, breath ragged, boots soaked, ears ringing. He counted. 4 trucks destroyed. 2 more disabled. Roughly 60 Germans, killed, wounded, or scattered. 0 American casualties. No one cheered. No one shouted. They just slipped back into the hedgerows, weapons ready, disappearing like ghosts. Before reinforcements came. Why did it work? Because the Germans weren't ready. They thought the front line was still at the beaches. They thought the paratroopers were still forming up, still lost in the fields. They never expected American troops this far inland, in the middle of the night, on their own supply road. So when the bazooka fired, they panicked. They didn't form up. They didn't fight back in formation. They scattered. The paratroopers had landed in the worst possible place according to the plan, and the best possible place according to the war, right on top of the main German supply artery to the coast. Every truck, half-track, ammo cart, and radio jeep had to pass this road. And now the Americans were here. Small groups. Hidden. Aggressive. Untraceable. And it didn't stop with Kowalski. By 2:15 a.m., 3 more lost paratrooper squads had found the same road. By 3 a.m., there were 7 groups. By dawn, 23. All of them scattered. All of them dropped in the wrong place. All of them hitting German convoys. With bazookas, satchel charges, and stolen German grenades. It wasn't strategy. It wasn't planned. But it worked. The German command panicked. Messages flew back and forth between headquarters. American paratroopers behind the lines. Strength unknown. Direction unknown. All roads under attack. German commanders made a fateful decision. Stop moving north. Find the paratroopers. Secure the roads. Every minute they spent hunting ambush teams. Scattered, outnumbered, nearly out of ammo. Was a minute they weren't reinforcing the beaches. That mistake would cost them Normandy. But it all started with a single radio operator, Staff Sergeant Thomas Whitaker, who turned his dial to the wrong frequency and sent 127 men into the wrong drop zone. And that mistake spread like wildfire. At 4 a.m., German General Wilhelm Folly, commander of the 91st Infantry Division, was racing toward the beaches in a staff car, trying to regroup. His orders were clear. Reach the coast. Stop the invasion. He never made it. A paratrooper from the 508th, Corporal John Steele, was crouched in a ditch near the road outside Picoville. He'd been separated from his unit for 2 hours. He had 1 grenade left. He heard the engine. A staff car. No escort. A blur of gray paint and headlights cutting through the fog. Steele pulled the pin. Counted to 2. Through. The grenade detonated beneath the front axle. The staff car jolted sideways, front wheels shattered, metal shrieking as it slammed into a tree at 40 miles per hour. Smoke. Crushed steel. Corporal John Steele rose from the ditch, rifle ready, heart pounding so loud he couldn't hear the engine stall. He moved slow, cautious, boots quiet in the wet grass. 2 German officers lay motionless in the front seat. One had blood on his collar, the other was slumped over the steering wheel. General's insignia. Steele didn't recognize it. Didn't know he'd just killed the only German general capable of coordinating the defense of Utah Beach. Wilhelm Folly, commander of the 91st Infantry Division. He just knew the road was quiet now. It wasn't planning. It wasn't doctrine. It was chaos, and it was working. By dawn, the German response to the paratroop landings was massive. And completely wrong. Scattered radio reports flooded command posts. Paratroopers near St. Mire-Église. Enemy contact south of Picoville. Shots fired near Amfreville. Multiple sightings, sizes unknown. No pattern, no logic, just noise. Some reports said 50 men. Others said 500. Some units claimed they were under attack from tanks that didn't exist. Confusion spread like smoke. The 709th Infantry Division, stationed near the coast, sent 4 full companies inland to hunt paratroopers. 1,200 German troops pulled off the beaches just hours before the landing. The 243rd Division did the same. Another 800 men sent south to secure roads that were already cut by American ambush teams. Roads where no one could move without risking bazooka fire. By 6:30 a.m., when the first landing craft slammed into Utah Beach, the German defense was in shambles. Not because of overwhelming numbers, not because of superior firepower, but because no one knew what was real. The German generals had no idea how many Americans were behind the lines. No idea where the main attack was coming from. No idea whether the beaches were the true invasion or just a feint. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel had warned them. The first 24 hours of the invasion will be decisive. The fate of Germany depends on it. But his plan relied on order, on timing, coordination, control. The paratroopers blew that apart. Scattered, out of position, underarmed. They did the one thing no German officer had prepared for. They turned the rear into the front. American casualties at Utah Beach were the lowest of any D-Day landing. 197 killed, compared to over 2,000 at Omaha. Historians argue. Better planning? Better terrain? Better luck? But the answer was simpler. The Germans weren't there. Half of them were inland, chasing shadows. Chasing paratroopers who weren't supposed to be there. Paratroopers who'd jumped into the wrong place and made it the most important place on the map. At 3:42 a.m. M.C., 47 number 42 to 92,847 landed back in England. Staff Sergeant Thomas Whitaker climbed out of the radio compartment, boots stiff with sweat and oil. His hands still trembled from adrenaline. The pilot stepped down beside him, slapped his shoulder. "Good work tonight, radio. Clean drop. Right on target." Whitaker nodded. Didn't say a word. He had no idea he'd sent 127 men into the wrong drop zone. No idea they'd crippled the German response. No idea their ambushes had saved the beach. He'd followed a blinking light, twisted a dial, made a mistake, and it changed the course of the war. He'd followed the beacon, got the paratroopers to the drop zone. Mission accomplished. Staff Sergeant Thomas Whitaker walked off the runway with the last of the flight crew, boots scraping tarmac, sky just starting to gray with dawn. He made his way to the debriefing tent, canvas flapping in the wind, half-lit by lanterns, full of exhausted officers hunched over paperwork. He filled out his report in silence. Aircraft 42 to 92,847. Pathfinder signal located at 42. 1 megahertz. Green signal, strong and steady. Drop executed on schedule. No mechanical issues. No injuries aboard. He handed it to the intelligence officer, a lieutenant who looked like he hadn't slept in 36 hours. The man barely glanced at it. There were hundreds like it stacked on the table. Same story. Same language. Drop on target. Mission successful. And that was the end of it. For now. 3 days later, when the after-action reports started coming in from Normandy, a map analyst working with Army intelligence in England noticed something strange. The 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment was supposed to land at Drop Zone A. Instead, they'd landed at Drop Zone C, 6 miles south. And they weren't alone. Parts of the 501st, the 56th, the 508th, and dozens of scattered jumpers from multiple regiments all showed up in the same area. St. Mire-Église, St. Marguerite, Picoville, places that were supposed to be lightly trafficked, not major landing zones. Someone dug into the flight logs. They found that 127 men from Whitaker's plane had landed there. But not just them. 17 C-47s in total had dropped their paratroopers in the exact same location. 17 planes. 723 men. All following the same beacon. And all of them were tuned to 42. 1 megahertz. Not the designated frequency for Drop Zone A, which was 38. 7. An investigation began. It took 6 weeks. Army intelligence interviewed pilots, navigators, radio operators. They examined flight paths, beacon logs, drop coordinates, weather conditions, terrain reports. They reconstructed every flight minute by minute. The pattern was undeniable. The primary frequency for drop zone had been dead or unreadable, likely due to a malfunctioning Pathfinder beacon or enemy interference. Radio operators, like Whitaker, had searched for a signal, found 42. One assumed it was the backup. None of them had access to the alternate frequency list. They weren't supposed to switch frequencies, but in the chaos, they did. 17 planes, 723 paratroopers, all landing miles from their assigned target. It should have been a disaster, but it wasn't. What the intelligence officers discovered next was unexpected. Those 723 paratroopers, the ones who'd landed in the wrong place, had done more damage to German operations than any other unit that landed correctly. They'd ambushed convoys, cut supply routes, blown bridges, and killed General Wilhelm Folly, the highest-ranking German officer near Utah Beach. They'd tied up German reserves, shattered communication lines, and convinced the Wehrmacht that a massive airborne force was operating in the rear. A colonel from the 82nd Airborne Division wrote in his field report, "The accidental drops near St. Marguerite created chaos in the German rear that no planned operation could have achieved. Small, scattered American units operating independently gave the illusion of a force 10 times their size. The Germans responded with panic. They diverted reserves from the beaches to internal security. They gave us the ground we needed." A British intelligence report reviewed German radio intercepts from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. on June 6. It found over 200 urgent transmissions from Wehrmacht units behind the front. Paratroopers near Picoville. Road ambush at Les Forges. Enemy troops observed near Saint Mare. Bridge out, requesting reinforcements. Rear compromised. Situation unclear. Multiple units cut off. While the Germans stared inland, the Allies hit the beaches. The math was simple. Because of a faulty beacon. Because of a missing frequency. Because a 23-year-old radio operator followed a blinking green light he didn't understand. Hundreds of paratroopers landed in the wrong place. And in doing so, they turned the tide of D-Day. They met at a diner off Route 30, just outside Pittsburgh. Formica table. Black coffee. Fog on the windows. Whitaker wore a flannel shirt and a VFW cap. He looked older than Morrison expected, tired, like a man who'd carried something for a long time without realizing it. Morrison laid the file on the table. Yellowed paper. Military stamps. Operation Overlord. Frequency deviation, June 6, 1944. Whitaker looked at the cover, confused. Morrison said, "You remember the Normandy drop? The radio signal?" Whitaker nodded slowly. "Yeah. Pathfinder signal went dead. I found a second one. Dialed it in. We made the drop." "You remember the frequency?" Whitaker squinted. 42.1. Morrison tapped the file. "That wasn't your drop zone." Whitaker didn't say anything for a few seconds. Just stared down at his coffee like he was trying to remember something from a dream. "I always thought it was a backup," he said. "The main signal went dark. I didn't know where else to look. The lights came on, and it just felt right." Morrison nodded. "It was the wrong beacon, but it was the right place. Your plane dropped 127 men into the center of the German rear. Their ambushes delayed over 4,000 enemy troops. They were supposed to be at Utah Beach. Instead, they spent the day hunting shadows." Whitaker let that sink in. "And the beach?" he asked quietly. 197 Americans killed." Morrison paused. "It was supposed to be 3,000. The analysts say 2,800 lives were saved." Whitaker leaned back in his chair. Exhaled hard. Not shock, just weight. Not pride. Not regret. Just the slow realization of something unimaginable. He shook his head. "No one ever told me. I thought." He trailed off. Morrison said, "You weren't supposed to know. They buried the file. Didn't want the public thinking the invasion was saved by an accident." "It wasn't an accident," Whitaker said. "It was a judgment call. I made the call." Morrison looked him in the eye. "You saved thousands of men, Staff Sergeant. The Army might never say it, but the truth is right here." He tapped the file again. Whitaker didn't say anything, just looked out the window at the cars going by. He never told his family. Not his wife. Not his kids. To them, he was just Dad. The guy who fixed antennas and came home smelling like solder and cold metal. But late at night, when the house was quiet and the world felt far away, Thomas Whitaker would sometimes wonder what would have happened if he hadn't seen that second dial. If he'd followed the book. If he'd done what he was trained to do. Maybe someone else would have made the same call. Maybe not. All he knew was that for once, he hadn't followed the rules. And because of that, the right men died in the wrong place. So that thousands more didn't have to. They sat in Whitaker's living room on a quiet Saturday afternoon in October. Colonel Samuel Morrison opened the file, laid out the documents across the coffee table, frequency logs, drop zone maps, casualty reports, intercepted German communications. He explained what the Army had never told him, how a single radio decision on D-Day had altered the course of the entire invasion. Whitaker listened in silence, hands on his knees, eyes on the file. "I thought I was following procedure," he said finally. "I thought 42, 1 was the backup." "It wasn't," Morrison replied. "It was the primary frequency for Drop Zone C, 6 miles south. You sent 723 men to the wrong place, and that saved the invasion." Whitaker looked out the window. His grandchildren were playing in the yard, kicking a ball across the lawn. He'd never told them much about the war. Never thought there was much to tell. He wasn't a hero. Just a radio man who turned dials, followed the checklist, did his job. Morrison leaned forward, closing the file. "The Army never told you," he said, "because they couldn't admit it. Couldn't admit that a mistake saved thousands of lives. But it wasn't just luck. You adapted. You made the call. When the system failed, you found a way to keep the mission alive." Whitaker didn't say anything. For 32 years, he'd believed the invasion had gone exactly as planned. Tight formations, precision drops, orders followed to the letter. Learning that it had been chaos, that his decision had rippled out into something far bigger, didn't make him feel like a hero. It made him feel like a man who'd stumbled into history and never knew. But Morrison understood something Whitaker didn't. Wars aren't won by perfect plans. They're won by ordinary people, making impossible decisions under impossible pressure, and refusing to quit. The paratroopers who jumped into Drop Zone C didn't know they were in the wrong place. They just fought. The Germans who chased them through the hedgerows didn't know it was a mistake. They just reacted. And Thomas Whitaker, 8,000 feet over Normandy in the dead of night, didn't know he was about to save thousands of lives. He just turned a dial and hoped it would work. Whitaker died in 1989. He was 68. His obituary in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette mentioned his Bronze Star and his service with the 82nd Airborne. It didn't mention Drop Zone C. It didn't mention the mistake. It didn't mention the 2,800 lives that may have been saved because of a single frequency change. But his family knew. Colonel Morrison had told them. And at the funeral, one of Whitaker's grandsons stood up and said this: "My grandfather never talked much about the war. He always said he just did his job. But I've learned that sometimes, doing your job in the middle of chaos is the most heroic thing you can do." The classified file was finally declassified in 1994. You can read it now. National Archives, RG 407, Box 2488. 37 pages. Maps, logs, reports, all documenting how one man's decision, made in fear, in darkness, and in defiance of the plan, helped shape the success of the largest amphibious invasion in human history. Not because he was perfect, but because when everything failed, he didn't. And sometimes that's enough.